Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Q&As, and as usual I'm going to break these up into two parts, and then I'm going to do a part 3 for the Gear Talk Q&A. So let's go ahead and get this started. First question. When we say do not mix high and low reps in the same session, does this count for the body as a whole? Or could we do, say, heavy triples on squat and 12 plus reps on the bench and chins for one session, and 20 rep squats and heavy triples on the bench and pendlays and others? Would this mess with the adaptations also? All right, good question. As far as that messing with the adaptations, of course it has the potential to mess with the adaptations because there is a systematic response as far as central nervous system fatigue. But a lot of the actual metabolic fatigue that we're talking about is specific to individual muscles. So as far as a negative effect on the adaptation from the training, a lot of that isn't about affecting the adaptation. It's about affecting the recovery curve of each type of training and reducing the performance in the next training session, meaning requiring more time before you fully recover. So someone who's training at a suboptimal frequency isn't going to suffer negative effects from this at all. The people who are going to suffer negative effects from the mixed rep ranges are people who are trying to train at an ideal training frequency in order to facilitate maximum adaptation. And that's the difference. It doesn't affect your training negatively in each individual session from actually mixing them. It affects recovery time of different systems, and that's your problem with it. So as far as that goes, potentially the really heavy triples on the big compounds could affect your ability to do the next session in some way, but the metabolic fatigue muscle to muscle is totally different. So again, you're only concerned with the fatigue from the high reps for the individual muscles working. The negative effects from the heavier ones are going to be more systematic. So it gets a little complicated when you want to train it that way, but it honestly isn't going to be that bad because you're actually mixing the different body parts to some extent with that. You're going to have a greatly reduced negative effect as far as that's concerned. So I would say if you want to train that way and you're not trying to push some extreme frequency or ride that bleeding edge of training frequency for maximum progress, I would say that doing it the way you're talking about is probably going to be okay. You might see some minor negative effects as far as the recovery curve goes doing it that way, but it's not going to be very large. It's going to be very minimal. Again, mainly because you're not overlapping the same body parts. It's when you come in and you try to do high rep squats behind heavy squats or something like that in the same day that you're really going to run into problems. Or you take too many of the smaller support muscles and fatigue them. For example, you take heavy bench press and you do too much high rep tricep work, it's going to affect your ability to train your triceps again sooner. And that's going to affect your big lifts that use the triceps. So that's your big concern. But by mixing them the way you're doing them, you're less likely to have any sort of adaptation problems as a result of recovery affecting your training frequency. All right, next question. I know you're not a fan of pre-workouts, but what are your thoughts on using them only during powerlifting meets, which would be up to 3 times a year? I would never use them during regular training sessions, but a powerlifting meet where it's ideal to be hyped up as possible is a different beast. Or would it be better to just use coffee instead, or Red Bull, or some kind of energy drink? All right, that's not a straightforward answer. I do agree with the premise you have there that on meet day, everything goes. Everything goes that isn't going to make you fail a drug test, but you didn't say if it was drug tested or not. If you compete in any sort of drug tested sport, including powerlifting, you should never, ever, ever put a fucking pre-workout into your body. I don't give a fuck how clean you think it is. So many pre-workouts have been caught spiking meth analogs and other stuff in them that anyone who is a drug-tested athlete who is stupid enough to take a pre-workout deserves to get pop and kicked out of their federation. They're just being a fucking idiot when they know this stuff gets spiked with drugs. In fact, over-the-counter supplements in general for drug-tested athletes are a very, very bad idea unless you have access to a lab yourself and you can get each new tub that you buy of something tested. If you're a drug-tested athlete and you use over-the-counter supplements, you're really potentially fucking yourself. Really bad idea. Now, if you are not a tested powerlifter, you compete in untested powerlifting, maybe, but again, you need to really look at them closer and figure out what's in those. I say the idea of it is fine, but you need to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to cause you cramping, that's going to mess with your fluid balance and things like that. And that's why for a lot of guys, it might be safer to just use caffeine. Just use caffeine to hype yourself up. Black coffee, But again, don't get too dehydrated with the black coffee. You need to be getting fluids in, so maybe even consider caffeine pills. Again, within limits, but you need to know how your body's going to react to those caffeine pills in a competition environment also. Again, I would lean in the direction of, instead of a pre-workout, which you don't always know how the mix is going to affect you because of the proprietary blends and things, and not always knowing specifically what they're putting in it, caffeine itself might be a better option as far as the stimulant end goes. But remember, guys, everything kind of goes in an untested powerlifting meet and over-the-counter pre-workout is so far behind the curve for guys who are really trying to win, because I've seen guys actually inject adrenaline and shit at a meet before. I've seen someone take a syringe and inject adrenaline before they compete. Guys use tons of gear before they come out there. Some guys just use mind-boggling amounts of orals on meet day. You see some crazy stuff happening anyway, so it is kind of an anything goes. So I'm going to leave that to you and your coach to figure out what you want to do there. But again, I would be leery of proprietary blends in which you don't know everything in there and how it's going to affect you, fluid balance, things like that. So you're going to have to weigh that out yourself. All right, next question. When progressing, will you get the most out of the training session if you're ready to increase the weight, but you only increase it 5 pounds, even though you know that you can handle a 10-pound increase? Will increasing that 5 pounds ensure the maximum amount of growth, or will only be a percentage of the possible benefit that you could have received if you would have increased it by 10 pounds? In theory, I know that the small increments are better for the long term because you're more likely to keep making small jumps rather than large jumps. Thanks. All right, good question. I lean in the direction of the smaller jumps, and here's why. I'm a big fan of microloading because here's what it ultimately comes down to. If you increase the weight on the bar 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 5 pounds, any small amount, but you are increasing your total workload with it, meaning you're getting some overload there, you are going to stimulate probably maximum growth from that training session. As long as your actual workload in the training session is sufficient to stimulate maximum growth, even small changes in weights with micro loading and even little bitty micro plates. I recommend people buy magnets and if they have to, or use the little bitty micro plates to load with. In fact, a lot of female lifters and lighter males who aren't as big yet, I recommend them going and buying those little 1 1/4 micro loading plates. Sometimes they only need to go up 2.5 pounds on a lift. That is enough to stimulate maximum growth if workload is sufficient. And so yeah, I'm a big fan of micro loading for people who aren't running big block style periodization, who are still doing linear progression purely for that purpose, because you can sustain the linear progression longer before you need to do weight resets and things like that. And the longer you can sustain linear progression, exactly as you said there, the longer you're going to be able to extend out your gains. It's usually in your best interest. I'm a big fan of micro loading like that, because remember guys, at the end of the day, it's not always about, oh, I could have increased the weight on the bar more. Yeah, maybe you could have, but if you increase it any measurable amount, even 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 5 pounds, and you still had sufficient workload to stimulate nearly maximum progress or maximum adaptation, it's not going to matter that you only increase it a small amount. You're still going to progress off of it, and you're going to progress at a very solid rate. So don't worry about that. Trying to push everything to the bleeding edge all the time is how people get burned out. That's how they get overuse injuries. It's not actually necessary to maximize your progress to ride that bleeding edge all the time. It just isn't necessary, and sometimes it can be downright foolish. There's no point in it. So 5-pound jumps, even for a novice lifter, is more than acceptable on your big lifts. You can make maximum gains doing it that way. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I've been lifting for around 5 years, squat 205 kilos, deadlift 240 kilos, and bench 140 kilos. Actually, that's pretty solid. Recently, I'm losing a bit of passion for resistance training and have been doing some road cycling. Nothing crazy, 2-hour rides maximum. As long as calories are sufficient, would cycling be a benefit or a hindrance to my resistance training? Thanks. Fantastic question. Adding significant amounts of list cardio regularly to someone who is primarily a strength-based athlete. Now, I'm going to call you a strength athlete. I mean, you're squatting 205 kilos. You've got a solid bench, deadlift, all of that, 5 years of training. We'll call you a strength athlete, no matter whether you compete or not. It can hurt you initially. The way that works, initially, sometimes the additional adaptations you're subjecting your body to, the additional workload, can make your strength regress just slightly for a little while. However, in the long term, the extra work capacity that you gain from the endurance work, the list cardio, the extra capillarization in your muscle tissue, and the ability to clear waste products more efficiently will over time, maybe 6 months to 9 months down the road, actually benefit you as a lifter. And that's the way you have to look at it. That's one of those things that in the short term will actually cause you to regress sometimes. Your squat might go down 10 kilos as a result of it for a few months. But in the long term, it will help you recover more efficiently. And you might find that even though you lose that 10 kilos off your squat, you might find 9 months or a year down the road that you gain 15 kilos. And when you're an advanced lifter like you are, being able to net a 5 kilo gain over a year on a big lift like the squat is considered very successful. So what's going to end up happening is, look at it that way. The pendulum's going to swing both ways on it. It's going to hurt you at first, and it's going to swing back the other way, and it's going to help you because it's going to make you more efficient at recovery. And list cardio is amazing for doing that. That's why I recommend everyone do list cardio, particularly strength athletes. That's why I do a lot of it. Everyone's like, well, why aren't you ripped if you do cardio every day? And it's like, because I'm not doing cardio to get ripped. I'm still eating food, lots of food. I do it for the health benefits and the recovery benefits and the work capacity benefits. And that's going to help make you stronger in the long term. So definitely keep doing it. But remember, you're playing the long game by adding in the lists, not the short game. All right, next question. Jason, I want to try a cycling ketogenic diet for general health. I've read up on it, and I think it's something I would like to try. I know you made a video saying that straight keto is not good for building muscle and optimal performance. Does the same go for CKD? Thanks, brother. Love the vids. I'm really not sure what you mean by the health benefits. Ketogenic diets are useful for people with certain medical conditions. If you have one of those medical conditions, it's absolutely worth trying. I happen to have a medical condition that is sometimes helped by ketogenic diets, and I mess with them. But a lot of the health benefits that you're trying to get from a ketogenic diet are going to be offset by running the CKD. So I'm not really sure what you're trying to achieve here. As far as ketogenic diets being better for health than just a general balanced diet, there's no evidence whatsoever that they improve health in any way over a balanced diet. In some ways they can equal it, but they don't improve upon it. So I don't understand exactly what you're doing. You need to clarify that and specify what you mean by that. Now, the cycling ketogenic diet is done to offset the performance hit that you get from a straight ketogenic diet. For people who are doing these for body composition purposes, that's the reason for running a CKD. It has nothing to do with your health or medical issues or anything. It is purely a body composition tool for people who lose weight and body fat easily on ketogenic diets because of the appetite control. For people who compete in weight classes in strength sports and things who do very well on a keto diet, the CKD is fantastic for that. It's a body composition tool for athletes, nothing more, nothing less. It's not going to improve your health in any way. Again, most of the medical issues that you might have that would benefit from a ketogenic diet, you're going to offset those slightly by running the cycling one. It may interfere with that a little bit, like epilepsy, various autoimmune issues, things like that. So I don't understand exactly what you're trying to achieve here. Maybe you've misread some stuff. People have taught you some incorrect information about it. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I'm 35 years old and only just began taking weightlifting more seriously about a year ago. Is lifting 6 days a week a bad idea for someone my age? Considering same volume is what I would normally do on a 3-day full body, but spread out evenly over 6 days, upper lower split instead. Is that too much for my age? Is the risk of not managing my fatigue too high with such a high frequency? Yeah, I think the risk of fatigue is too high with what you're doing, particularly at your age. There's a reason I recommend full body programs 3 to 4 days a week for most people, particularly drug-free people, is because they can push sufficient workload to stimulate all the adaptations and growth that they want while giving themselves plenty of recovery time, particularly their connective tissue recovery time. The only benefit to training more than 3 to 4 days a week is training for specific lifts, meaning you're performing specific exercises every single day, which you won't be doing on a split routine. You'll be performing specific exercises every single day to improve your neural efficiency and skills at those exercises. And so, for example, Bulgarian style training, where you're training a training max every single day. You're not coming in and doing large amounts of volume with those training maxes. You're training your motor patterns to hit maxes every single day over and over and over. Doing a 6-day-a-week training to where you're actually coming in and splitting the whole body up and an upper lower, where you're probably doing all sorts of various exercises spread out over 6 days, because of the way it's going to affect connective tissue, because a lot of your upper body exercises are going to hit the lower body, a lot of lower body exercises are going to hit the upper body. You are going to be putting large amounts of fatigue and micro tearing on your connective tissue and your joints over and over and over. It's one thing when you're coming in doing very low volumes or very specific exercises to improve the motor patterns on that exercise. It's another thing when you're actually coming in and training to fatigue. I think drug-free people who are not on drugs to help with connective tissue should not be lifting weights 6 days a week. And at 35 years old, I'm going to recommend that you not do that. I think you're setting yourself up. If you're pushing yourself to any reasonable degree, you're going to get more issues and need deloads more often. You're going to predispose yourself to overuse injuries of connective tissue. I don't generally recommend that you do it. And I'm not saying some people can't get away with it. I've seen people who can get away with it. I've also seen people who get hurt doing this. Again, I'm going to recommend that you limit yourself to 3 to 4 days a week training as a drug-free lifter, particularly in your 30s. Slow, steady progress with plenty of recovery time wins the game. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.